Hello and welcome to Two Therapists and a Microphone. I am Dr. Harrison Davis. Dr. Aisha is not with me today, otherwise she would be singing her part right now. Dr. Aisha is at the American Counseling Association conference in Atlanta, and she's representing Georgia as she's the chairperson for the Georgia chapter of the American Counseling Association. And she has some leadership responsibilities where she was recently elected by her peers as the president for the Association for Multicultural Counseling and Development. So I'm holding down the fort tonight by myself. But so to continue, Two Therapists at a Microphone is a show about mental health, relationships, and social issues that personally affect you. We air live every Thursday evening at 7:30 p.m. And Aisha's part, I don't know that one too well. We are two licensed psychotherapists with decades of clinical experience, and we want to hear from you. We want to hear about what's going on with you, your lives, your situations, your dilemmas. So go to www.twotherapist.com. That's two, TWO, therapist with an S.com, and click on Ask Two Therapists at the top. So today's topic is something that I wanted to talk about as I recently attended my own conference for diversity officers in higher education. It was in San Diego last month. And there was a term that I heard over and over and over again, and that was anti-racist activist. And I was intrigued by that term. It was new to me. But as I learned about the concepts and the ideas, I was beginning to conclude, I think I'm an anti-racist activist, and it's quite different from other things. So I found a guest whose expertise is in that particular topic. So let me welcome Brittany Works. She's a licensed clinical social worker, founder and executive director of Matters of Our Mind, LLC, and serves as a consultant for educators, nonprofit organizations, and community to address structural racism, understand the impact of trauma and implicit bias in the workplace, and provide evidence-based models that promote trauma-informed care and culturally specific strategies to enhance agency mission. As a former mental health therapist in the Georgia prison system and serving as a former supervisor for a community-based mental health team in metropolitan Atlanta, Brittany understands the impact of systemic racism and trauma on Black life and believes that balanced historical perspective coupled with evidence-based practices create individuals qualified to impact outcomes in their communities and places of business. Brittany holds a Bachelor of Social Work from Oakwood University and an MSW from Clark Atlanta University. And she's also been recognized for exceptional leadership and commitment to her community. Brittany, yes. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Dr. Harrison, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm glad to have you because I need to talk to somebody about this. You know, somebody who's actually read the book,
talk about it.
You know, on it, who actually does this on a day-to-day basis as I'm trying to figure out where do I fit into, you know, anti-racist activism. But can you define that term for the audience?
Absolutely. You know, it's really simple. Anti-racism activism is really, anti-racism is the act of really intentionally identifying racism and seeking to change policies, behaviors, and even mindsets about racism and what that looks like for us in our various settings.
Gotcha.
And environments as well.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like you know it requires a lot of you sometimes. Now, a term, we were talking about this earlier, that I'm familiar with, you know, being a counselor and attending counseling conferences, and it was a big push for social justice advocates that are out there, and I think I was one. But what would be the difference between a social justice advocate and an anti-racist activist?
Right. So, like, really since summer of 2020. Since the death of George Floyd, we've seen a lot of these terms kind of coming into play. And when I think of a social justice activist, that would be someone who is seeking, social justice in various aspects, and that can include anti-racism, because that is one area of social justice. But social justice can lend itself to so many other areas. It can lend itself to LGBT rights. It can lend itself to,
The
feminism
poor.
and rights as it regards, patriarchy and sexism. So it has a very large lens, but ultimately, social justice is seeking to, provide equity and social justice for all individuals. And then when you're looking at anti-racism, it's specifically saying, okay, we want to focus on this, I guess, subset of social justice, if you will, and
Okay.
look at what that means for the Black and white issue in our country. It's looking at what racism is, how it impacts the policies in our work, how it impacts us as individuals, how it impacts our minds and our mental health. So it encompasses specifically looking at racism. And to define just the word anti-racism more specifically, is really seeking to undo, whiteness, and making sure that we are not promoting any policies or ideas that promote white as better, or
Gotcha.
that seek to look at African Americans as, superior. And that can look in like different things.
Yeah, as I was doing some research, I was realizing, it's nothing wrong with being a social justice advocate. You're
Right.
promoting fairness, on a number of levels, and you named several of them, and sometimes, I saw that some of my colleagues would post messages on social media, sometimes they were encourage people to write a letter, to a politician, and I'm all for that. But I
Right.
just remember when I heard about anti-racist activism, wow, did it fit me like a glove? Because
Right.
it appears to require you to do more than promote. That's to and also go out there and do something to inspire change. If you're passionate about that, particularly Black folks, like I
Right.
am, in our spaces and our condition in our communities, it requires us to go out there and actually do something besides post a cute little statement,
Right.
on social
Absolutely.
media. You got to get out there and hold a sign sometimes,
Mhm.
or you got to confront somebody. So those are elements of anti-racist activism that I really enjoy. And I was glad to find out about it because it seems to be for a warrior. It's like the person who is ready to go out there and fight, as
Right.
opposed to being a cheerleader on the
Mhm.
sidelines. But what are some elements of it that you like, that you're most passionate about?
You know, when I look at the work of anti-racism, what I'm passionate about is, I love the work of getting out into the community and
Action
seeking,
oriented.
I love the action oriented piece. I do. And I really was able to be involved in that during the summer of 2020, especially here in Atlanta. There was, so there was a lot going on. We had a lot going on. But the other part that I love about anti-racism work is how personal it is to Black people, particularly as it relates to our healing,
Yep,
and
it's
how,
about us.
yeah, it's about us. And when we look at anti-racism, it's a broad term, and a lot of times we see it like on this organizational or like big policy political level. But anti-racism is undoing the internalized racism that we've taken in as well. So many of us in our community, we have internalized so much racist ideology, whether it's through our belief systems about Black women, whether it's through what we believe and propagate about Black men, whether it's about, there's so many errors in our community that we've experienced. For example, the crack error, which was a very intentional design, but we have an entire community who's been impacted by it still generationally.
Yep.
And so it's taken the time to identify it and work through it. And I think that that's one of my favorite things
So
for
it
sure.
sounds like anti-racism activism involves dismantling
Hmm.
some systems, and some behaviors, some policies. It also sounds like it is fueled by some theories that are out there. What are some theories that are contributing to anti-racism activism?
That to anti-racism activism.
Yeah, some theories that are about society and the structure that we live in, the
Ah,
social
yes,
structure that we live in.
absolutely. So anti-racism believes that our country, at its core, has racism woven into the fabric of our nation in
Hmm.
every aspect of our
Hmm.
country. And so, you know, that theory, that, even more so fact, um, anti-racism looks to undo that and to understand how racism has intersected itself into so many areas of our lives, personally and professionally as well.
Yeah. So it requires us to educate ourselves. If
Absolutely.
you haven't been educated
Absolutely.
about our history,
Hmm.
that some people are trying to put up a smokescreen and make us believe something different, and
Yeah.
realize some realities about the founding of this country, how we got here, number
Right.
one, and why we're not in the same place as other people who came voluntarily. So it sounds like anti-racist activism requires us to have a critical lens, looking at our history and a number of things that are in place. But
Very.
that would make a few people uncomfortable, and it is making people
Oh yeah.
uncomfortable, to have us talk about some realities. We could just go back over the last 40, 50 years and some policies
Hmm.
that are out there. But I'm glad to hear that it requires us to learn, because that ignorance, can really make us make some poor decisions that
Absolutely.
are out there. Is it easy for you to encourage people to educate themselves about realities or history, or to
Um,
encourage, or for you to provide that information to them? How easy is that for you?
well, I'm very passionate about it, so it comes very naturally for me. But, in professional settings, when I'm having to deliver or provide this information and training, it can be challenging to make sure I relay the information in a way that's authentic without, you know, I don't want to say causing discomfort, because I believe that sometimes we have to just be uncomfortable.
How
But
can you
basically,
avoid it?
but that's like the internal dilemma that I kind of run into sometimes. And I've had some really interesting moments during workshops and presentations where it's like, okay, what do I do? What do I say? But it's like I have to be real. I have to keep it real, and I have to like provide this information, because the thing is, when people know, they do better, know better, do better. And
Sometimes.
honestly, right, true, true. But so many times when I've done workshops, I've had so many people, white people, come to me and say, I had no idea. And
Gotcha.
we can see now how this information is being kept. We have these issues being in school, so people don't know, and providing that information really allows people to say, okay, I've been thinking different, so I've been doing things a certain way. Let's see what happens when I have this information at my exposure.
Yeah, and it's just a question. I'm glad you're doing that. I have
Mm.
to do that a little bit, with my current position. I just don't have to talk about history a lot,
Right.
But my question, sometimes I wonder, um, why can't those individuals, those white folks, go and do their own research? There's plenty of information out there.
Absolutely.
I mean, there are webinars, there are documentaries. I mean, did they think Roots was a fiction?
Right.
How do you feel when you have to come against people who are having a hard time believing, or for the first time realizing the impact of slavery and Jim Crow laws? What is that like for you when you interact with a person like that?
I'm gonna be honest, that's been a journey for me. Because of our just frankly egregious history in this country, it's very difficult to be gracious. But I have learned through just the time and maturity that truly people are ignorant and do not know. Now, you have different groups of people. You have people who choose to be ignorant and choose
Yep.
to, with information, whenever I'm in my presentation, I say, hey, I did not go into this work for them, frankly. I came into this work for, number one, to help my community, but
Gotcha.
also to educate white people who are like, oh, wait, I didn't know. And we have so
Yep.
many every day that we work with. Oh, I don't see color. And oh, everybody's the same. That type of racism. I call it nice racism, where you just don't know. And so I like to be able to provide that information, because,
Oblivious.
and yeah, and provide and then grace, because listen, they're trying to keep kids in 2022 from learning history. Imagine what was going on 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah, I
So,
remember a moment when I was a professor. I taught master's level counseling and a multicultural counseling course. In the beginning,
mm,
we talk about some societal issues, And I made the statement one time in front of class, after 300 years of slavery and torture, we got to think about what's the impact of that. And my classes were all white until my last few years there. It was all white students. I was at the University of North Georgia. And one of the students said, 300 years? I said, yeah, the period of slavery. But that wasn't the end of it. There were laws set up.
Mhm.
He said, I didn't know it was 300 years.
Mhm.
I said, yeah. What did you think? What did you I
Yeah.
said, I was amazed.
Mhm.
I had to I had to stop myself to realize he didn't have my education.
Right.
He didn't grow up in my community. He didn't have my parents. I
Mhm.
was privileged to grow up in a black neighborhood and went to all black
Right.
schools K through 12, where I learned a great deal of black history. But
Absolutely.
I knew more about black history than I did US history when I went to college. But I was just amazed at
Mhm.
how oblivious people can be to the some of the history of our country, where they don't even realize how long slavery took place.
And the thing is, the powers that be do not, they're not projecting the appropriate narrative. And oftentimes, one of the things that I sat with recently within the past few years was the like transatlantic slave trade.
Yep.
And for some reason, as a child, I imagined it where the ship came to Africa, picked up the slaves, picked up the Africans,
Hmm.
enslaved them, brought them to
Yep.
America. Language is important. Brought them to America, and then that was it. And I knew that that was a bad experience, but I don't think we actually sit with how long that happened every day. This wasn't just a one-time event. This happened for specifically 150 years, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And it's just so egregious to sit with, but we're not exposed to it.
Yep.
Even amongst our own community, we still oftentimes lack the information to
We
understand
do.
how we have come to be where we are today.
Yeah, I recently had a conversation with my wife's niece who grew up in New York and went to a private Catholic high school, and I believe middle school. I'm just not too sure, but it was all white.
Mhm.
And she graduated and she's in college in North Carolina. And she was saying she wasn't taught. I mean, she's in college now.
Mhm.
She wasn't taught accurate Black history, and she
Mhm.
was happy that she can go on the internet and find the information and the news that she needed. And so even Black folks sometimes, and we have some politicians who are trying to stop us from
Right.
knowing our own history that's out there. But it keeps you dumb,
Mhm.
and it doesn't stir up passion in you when you realize things are going on that impact you and your community. And
Right.
sometimes
And
those
you
individuals will criticize the Black folks before they criticize the other people.
and you have to really stop and think, why is this information not out? Why are politicians going to such great extents to keep this information from us? Something as simple as understanding slavery and policies that are right there, going through those lists to keep it from us. There's a reason for that.
Gotcha. So how does this look for the average Black person, to become anti-racist activists? What does that
Mm.
really look like? Break that down for some of the listeners who are watching in case they're wondering, what the hell are they talking about?
Right,
Or I might be one. Can you tell us,
right,
what does it look like on a
right. You
day-to-day
might already
basis?
be one, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
it looks like in different ways. For me, it I have a job doing this. I go out, I do this work. And for someone else, they may want to get involved in their community and look at policies in their within their city council and going to those meetings and looking at ways to provide equitable services for their own community. Or it could be even more personal, as simply as sitting down with their own family and looking at the generational traumas that have occurred and saying, okay, listen, we have some healing to do. Because the reality is, within our community, the Black community, we have such complex intergenerational trauma, which is directly related to policies that have impacted us for generations. And
Yeah.
so that is the work of anti-racism, sitting down with your son and I have a
Yep.
10-year-old and explaining, baby, this is your history. This is
Yep.
who you are. This is what society says you are. These
Yep.
are the messages you're going to receive, but this is who you are. And we correcting that. That's anti-racism, because all of those messages, for example, the stereotypes about Black men, we know what they are.
Mhm.
It could be violent, over sexualized stuff, all those things.
News
That
reminds
all
us every day.
every day, that all of those stereotypes are directly related to racist ideology that has been perpetuated by white dominant groups for the purposes, almost always for their own economic gain in some reason, but it has affected us. And when we are able to sit with that in our own families, in our own communities, it's powerful, it's healing, and it's restorative.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, because I can see myself in all of that, even with I have an 11, 12-year-old daughter
Right.
now, and I've had to have had conversations with her, especially after George Floyd.
Hmm.
And it was just, we just couldn't hide it from her, and she found the video on her phone. And then, for the first time, talking about some realities that are out there that are not pretty.
Right.
I like for her to
Absolutely.
stay innocent. I think she was like 9 or 10 at the time. I wanted her to
Hmm.
stay innocent, and everyone, the world is fun, and all her friends. It doesn't matter what they look like, but there's some realities out there, and I had to do it. And I
Absolutely.
remember what my dad told me. Growing up in a black neighborhood, he came from a small black town. Throughout the 50s and 60s, and it was some harsh words that I heard, and I remember telling myself, I don't want to do that, but there I was cleaning up some of the language,
Hmm.
but sharing some of the same information. But it can be tough, you
Very
know,
tough.
telling a child your experience with the world might change real soon,
Real
and
soon.
here's how it's going to look.
And specifically, like with me, with my 10-year old son, he's tall. My son does not look 10 at all, and he's in third grade, so he looks 13, 14, and people adultify him all the time, and
Yep.
it scares me. They don't see the innocent 10-year-old that I
Yep.
see. So you combine that with him being a Black boy, it can be very scary.
Hmm. And outside of that, I can see myself doing other things that you talked about, just standing up for some injustices. It's like making a
Hmm.
conscious decision,
Right.
recognizing, no, that's not right, or
Hmm.
that was an insulting statement, but actually confronting it,
Right.
which requires a little bit more motivation, to the person who said something that you're not quite sure, what they meant by it. Because, some people, they have a way to insult you or
Listen, those
people, yeah,
microaggressions.
without you knowing it
Listen,
until the next day,
you're like, wait a minute.
what do you say to the audience and about what it takes to confront those personal racist attacks that are out
um,
there?
it definitely takes having peace with yourself, because even in moments where you call certain things out, or what I like to say, I call them teachable moments. When I
Mm,
call a racism out in its time, um, it still may not go the way I want it to go, and this
yeah,
person may still walk away saying things that are insulting to me and
true,
offensive to who I am.
true.
But making peace with who I am, but also understanding that this peace me does not mean that I'm harmless, in that I'm not going to be a man. I will call you out. And we are living in a different time where we have a lot more voice in our environment and in our jobs than we did pre May 2020.
Well, speak
You
for
know,
yourself. I was always outspoken.
oh, right. And
I,
I was too. And I was too. But I think that systemically,
it's more
the
common now.
it's more common. And I think that there are more things in place in a lot of our work environments since the death of George Floyd that allow us to have the safety to speak up a little bit more.
Yeah,
Everybody has a DEI program now, something that we didn't see as much, and
true.
all of those things coming into play.
Yeah, but you got to be bold,
You
And
do.
I like how you said it's about you and your
Hmm.
piece, not
All of
so
it.
much about the person who made the insulting comment or statement, and
Hmm.
pretending like they didn't really mean that. It's about you maintaining your peace and how you're going to handle this and make sure that you're satisfied.
Let me
You
say
know,
this.
go ahead.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. So I remember I was at work once and I had this moment where this doctor did something that was just flat out racist. Don't have time to get into it, but it was just so overtly racist. And
Oh, I
I
believe
was
you.
I was on fire, Dr. Harrison. I was so upset. I was so angry. Like, I mean, if it wasn't, work, sometimes I wonder, like, I was just raging. And I remember afterwards going back to my office mad.
Yep.
Got in my car, mad. On the highway, mad in traffic, picking up
Yep.
my son. He's like, Mommy,
Yep.
what's wrong? Boy, get in the car, mad. At home, mad. And I thought to myself, I've carried this with me all day.
Yep.
and she at home chilling with her husband, doing
Yep.
whatever it is she wants to do. And
Drinking a latte.
I am carrying, drinking a latte, and I am carrying this with me.
Yep.
Nah. And not only that, but it affects our body. We know what that does when we hold it in. So
Yep.
I said, I don't want that to be me. So I'm gonna make it about
Yeah,
peace.
yeah, you have to, and I'm glad you mentioned that. Because I think I've been doing this work for a long time. I can remember
Hmm.
being in grad school 25 years ago, the only black student in the doc program, and then another white student made the comment that I was there because of some diversity initiatives, and I remember at that moment saying to myself, like it was last week, you're not going to get away with that, and I had to let them know what I brought to the table. And coincidentally, I had higher GRE scores than he had. Coincidentally, I was already licensed, and he wasn't.
Right.
Coincidentally, I had an extra degree than he had.
Mhm.
So you have to make a decision, like you said. How am I going to walk away from this? Am I going to be proud of myself? And
Right.
sometimes I just can't let them walk away and feel
Mm-mm.
good because I'm
'Cause
not
I
going to
need my
be
peace.
I'm not going to be disrupted,
It's about my peace. That's right.
or I'm not going to be the only one disrupted. But there is a cost to it, and sometimes we have to be prepared for that.
Right.
So, Brittany Works, I have enjoyed having you here. Are
Thank you
there
so
any
much.
final words you want to say to the audience?
I just want to encourage everyone to continue the work of anti-racism, even if you feel like it may not be for you, black or white. It's a specific work for each of us to do, especially for Black folks to heal and to be mindful of how racism impacts us every day, our bodies and our families, and just do
Absolutely.
the work.
I say do something. You got to do
That's right.
something,
Do something.
and that's what I decided to do a long time ago. I'm not here to make
Hmm.
other people feel comfortable, and happy about their insults. I'm going to call you out on it. There is a price to pay. I realize
Absolutely.
that also, but you have to be ready for it. But just like you mentioned, driving home and the next day you holding
Hmm.
that stuff, and they're at home chilling, and they're the ones who insulted you. You
Don't
know,
sit
you
well with me.
you got to make a decision on how you're going to handle that. So I like some of the ideas
Absolutely.
about anti-racist activism. What's the name of the book you can recommend to people?
Um,
One by Kendi.
Kendi, yeah, he has several. One stunt from the beginning, and then he has one called "How to Be an Anti-Racist."
That's it. That's
Yeah.
it. That's one
Mhm.
that I just ordered on Amazon. So
Yes.
thank you, Brittany, for joining us. Can you tell the audience how can they contact you if they want
Absolutely.
to
So,
continue this discussion?
absolutely. I have an Instagram page, and it is called Healing, HealingN, the letter N, chilling, Chilling. So, Healing and Chilling. You can find me on Instagram, and we
All
can
right,
discuss these
check
matters
that
more.
out if you guys want to talk to Brittany Works. Again, you guys are listening and watching Two Therapists on the Microphone. You can catch us here every Thursday evening at 7:30 p.m.
Mhm.
That's live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. We will see you guys next week.
Thank you.